Welcome in to Steelers Talk by Chat Sports, presented by Prize Picks. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. And today it's time to meet Steelers rookie wide receiver Germie Bernard as we continue on here with our Steelers Talk player profile series when it comes to the new rookies here on the Steelers roster. I think Germie Bernard is going to make quite an impact for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. Can't wait to talk about his skill set and how he fits inside Mike McCarthy's offense heading into his rookie campaign. But before we talk about Germie Bernard today, make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon to welcome Germie to the Steel City. Greatly appreciate your guys' support. And of course, everybody that clicks that thumbs up icon is helping today's show get in front of newer audiences. If you click that thumbs up icon, YouTube's going to recommend this video to other Steelers fans across the globe. So if you guys want to help this video be as good as it can possibly be, make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon to help support the show. All right, so as always here, we're going to start with my scouting report of Germie Bernard here, and it starts with the size and build for me, guys. Very solidly built player at 6'1", 206 pounds. Now, I don't think you necessarily would classify him as like a DK Metcalf, like giant receiver or anything like that, but very solidly built. You can tell he's in terrific shape, and also he's got adequate NFL speed. You know, that was one of the things coming out and into this draft process that people really questioned about Germie Bernard, and really he's so smooth as an athlete. It looks like he's running slower than he actually is, but he ran a 4.48, I believe it was, at the NFL Combine this year, and he is definitely somebody that has adequate NFL speed. He's not going to be a burner or anything like that, but he's certainly got enough juice in the tank to survive at the NFL level. But really where, you know, it really starts to get special for Germie Bernard, in my opinion, is the run after catch ability and the yak ability that he brings to the table for the Pittsburgh Steelers on day one. And, you know, really what makes Bernard special as an after-the-catch specialist, in my opinion, is not necessarily the speed. You know, it's the contact balance, it's the vision, and it's also the spatial awareness. And what I mean by spatial awareness is he just has a knack for knowing where defenders are and how to attack angles and how to make people miss. And, you know, his body control is insane after the catch as well. And he knows how to set up blockers, kind of like a running back. And, you know, he just finds these little creases to exploit, and he is very, very effective after the catch, even though he's not necessarily a burner. And Aaron Rodgers is absolutely going to love Germie Bernard because he's just going to be an easy button for him in this offense. If he sees something pre-snap where it's like, I can get this out to Germie Bernard really quickly with a high percentage throw, and he's going to have an advantage on the perimeter where maybe he makes one guy miss and he's off to the races, kind of like he used Kenneth Gainwell this past season, only in a wide receiver form. You know, I think Germie Bernard is going to become a very big focal point of this Steelers offense, particularly if Aaron Rodgers comes back because of his ability to be such a threat after the catch. But not only that, guys, he's also a very nuanced route runner. And, you know, this is kind of rare for younger wide receivers coming into the league. You don't really see guys that run routes like pros heading into the National Football League, but Germie Bernard absolutely brings that to the table here. And why that's important for the wide receiver that the Steelers were going to end up drafting this year if they wanted that rookie receiver to have success is because Aaron Rodgers really holds his wide receivers to a very high standard of how they tempo their routes. They have to be breaking open at the correct timing of the progression for Aaron Rodgers. And obviously Rodgers is a very quick mental processor, so that window of opportunity for that receiver to break open and still get the football is very, very small. So you have to run routes like a pro, and most young wide receivers struggle with tempo and nuance and all these different things that you know, veterans like Adam Thielen and MVS brought to the table at least a little bit better than, say, Roman Wilson did last year. Also, Roman was just miscast on the outside by Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith. He's more of a slot specialist, but that's neither here nor there. But Bernard already has that trait down pat, and he's going to be able to kind of cater to Aaron Rodgers in that way as well. So even though Germie Bernard is a rookie receiver, and traditionally Aaron Rodgers has not played particularly well and connected early on with younger receivers, I think Germie Bernard could be the exception here because of his yak ability and his nuanced route running ability. Now coming up here, I've got 4 more pros in Germie Bernard's profile. I got 2 cons to discuss, and then my day one expectations for Mr. Germie Bernard. But before we continue on with our show here today on Steelers Talk, let's have a word from our sponsor here at Prize Picks, which is America's #1 sports picks app. Playoff basketball is still here, guys, but it won't be around forever, and there's no better place to cash in during playoff season than with our friends at Prize Picks. The app is super easy to use. You just pick more than or less than on a few player stat projections and then lock in your lineup. If you're a basketball, if basketball's not your thing, they have a ton of other sports to choose from as well, with a number of different stat projections to choose from with every single sport to truly customize your daily lineups. You can even look ahead to next year's football season if you want and look at total touchdowns for next season for receivers for like Puka Nacua, for example, or passing yards for quarterbacks like Dak Prescott and Caleb Williams. This particular projection, if you do a power play, which means you have to get all three correct to cash out, you guys can put in a $20 entry fee and get $120 back if you get all three correct. One thing that I love about the Prize Picks app, guys, is the new social feeds feature where you can share Prize Picks with your friends and copy lineups with a single click. You can actually follow me on the app like any other social media platform at Sperry to see all of my lineups. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with Prize Picks today. Click the link in the comments and description to download the app, and a big thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring Steelers Talk. Continuing on here with the things that I like about Germie Bernard and his profile heading into the National Football League, he's got super reliable hands. All right, now maybe his ball tracking ability vertically down the field and maybe the contested catch stuff isn't as special as some other receivers in this class, but if he's open and you put the ball in his general vicinity, he is going to come down with the football. That's another thing that I think is going to build trust between him and Aaron Rodgers very quickly here in Pittsburgh. But then another reason why I think the Steelers particularly like Germie Bernard is his alignment versatility. He can line up outside, certainly has the size and strength to be able to play out there, but he's also got the quickness to play in the slot. And then also Alabama lined him up in the backfield a number of times last year as well, used him as a screen threat, and I think that Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy can really have some fun with how they align Germie Bernard and find some creative ways to get him the football. And like I said, be that kind of easy button for Aaron Rodgers in this offense. And now you get all three starting wide receivers here with DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman Jr., and Germie Bernard that can all play on the outside and in the slot at times and on certain concepts. Obviously, DK is probably going to spend most of his time on the outside, but in certain concepts, he can play in the slot. Same thing goes with Michael Pittman Jr., who honestly might be best as a slot receiver at this point in his career. We'll see what the splits kind of look like here, and then Germie can line up outside, slot, and then also in the backfield. So the versatility with this group is really, really fun, and I can't wait to see how Mike McCarthy and Brian Angelico utilize this group heading into next season. But then also, Germie is a very willing run blocker. His technique is not perfect heading into the league. There's better run blockers in this wide receiver class than Germie, but he's going to be bringing a decent amount of size and definitely a lot of will-do attitude when it comes to the run blocking, so that's not going to be a concern. And then also, Germie Bernard is just a high-character dude. Whenever you hear him talk, he's always talking about his faith and all that different stuff, and he tries to be a high-character dude. And everybody that talks about this guy from Alabama just talks about how hard of a worker he is, how good of a teammate he is, how good of a worker he is. So if the Steelers were concerned about maybe some of the personality issues and behavioral issues of Deontay Johnson and George Pickens in the past, you're not going to have to worry about that with Germie Bernard. He's going to come to work every day, be a good teammate, do everything that he's supposed to do, and that's another big reason why I love this pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, my take on Germie Bernard, guys, is that he was one of the most well-rounded wide receivers in the entire 2026 wide receiver draft class. Now, I do project him probably more as like a number 2 wide receiver in the league, not a number 1 guy, but I had him ranked number 7 on my wide receiver rankings this year, only behind the 6 guys that were projected first-round picks this season. And, among the round 2 type of wide receivers in this class, I like Germie Bernard more than anybody else. And the fact that the Steelers were able to get this guy in the middle of round 2 I think was a very good pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think it was around the right value for a guy of Germie Bernard's skill set. Now, talking about the cons, I think that there's less cons to talk about with Germie because he is so well-rounded, in my opinion. But if you want to talk about the things that he's not like really good at, he's not a burner. He's not going to be somebody that's going to be winning like vertically down the field, 20+ air yards down the field, like consistently. But hey, you've got Michael Pittman Jr., who's an excellent contested catch guy down the sideline if you want to use him in that way, and DK Metcalf is obviously a vertical threat as well with his size and speed combination. And then Bernard, when it comes to his separation on deep routes, it isn't spectacular either, just because he doesn't have that long speed to separate from DBs 20+ air yards down the field. It doesn't mean that he can't separate on posts and on deep digs and stuff like that, but I do think that his specialty is certainly the short and intermediate game as he heads into the National Football League, which probably limits his ability to be a true number one receiver. And, that's why I project him as a high-end number two guy in the league. You got to have that number one guy that can certainly do it all and especially take the top off the defense. That's going to be something that you want as a complement to Germie Bernard in your offense. But the good news is the Steelers already have that in DK Metcalf. So I'm really excited to see how Bernard kind of meshes with DK and Pittman, who are both under contract for the next 4 years, the same length as Germie Bernard's rookie contract. And I think, you place him in here, you got one of the more well-rounded wide receiver trios in the National Football League. That's locked up now for the next 4 years. Now, my pro comp on Germie Bernard is actually Adam Thielen, who I never really thought, elevated to the point where he was a true number one wide receiver, but he was one of the better wide receiver twos in the league for a very long time. And, the body control and the spatial awareness that Thielen played with, even though he wasn't the most special athlete in the world, he brought some decent size to the table, made some really good catches, had super reliable hands. Everything about Germie Bernard's game reminds me of a young Adam Thielen. And if we get the kind of production out of Germie Bernard here in Pittsburgh that Adam Thielen had in his prime days there with the Minnesota Vikings, that's going to be something that, is going to be super productive, and Germie Bernard is going to be a slam dunk pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers in round 2. Now, my guess in terms of day one expectations for Germie is that he will be this team's starting wide receiver 3 from day one. And like I talked about, I think that Mike McCarthy and Brian Angelico are going to try and find ways to use him creatively with motion and putting him in the backfield and shifts and all these different things. And then that kind of opens up DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman Jr. to kind of do their thing on the perimeter. And, you can move pieces around because Bernard can also play on the outside if you want him to. You still got Roman Wilson as well, who I think will be kind of a fourth rotational piece as a true slot weapon, kind of a smaller slot type of player. But, I think that Germie Bernard does slot in above Roman Wilson heading into the year. Obviously, there will be a competition heading into camp, but I think Bernard will end up winning that competition and get more snaps than Roman Wilson will this year. Now, in terms of was this a good pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think that it is. Now, does it suck that Pittsburgh missed out on Makai Lemon? Yeah, sure. Makai was another one of those guys that runs super nuanced routes. I compared his game to Jackson Smith and Jigba. It would have been really nice to add a player like that in round 1. That's why the Steelers were on the phone with him. However, Bernard was one hell of a consolation prize to walk away with here if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I talked about it actually in our Maxi Honiger video yesterday where I said, you weren't going to get a future, potentially elite starting offensive tackle in round 2. However, you got your guy in Max Honiger, who's hopefully going to be a right tackle of the future in round 1, and then you were able to pivot to Germie Bernard, who's not that far away from Makai Lemon as a wide receiver prospect. They're really not very similar skill sets. They do a lot of the same things very, very well. So personally, I'm very excited to see what Germie Bernard is going to be here in Pittsburgh. And if he plays well, I don't know if we're going to be talking about Makai Lemon in that infamous phone call here in just a few short years. So true or false? Let me know down there in the comments section. Pittsburgh has a top 10 wide receiver trio in the NFL right now. Give me a T if you think that statement is true, or type P if you think that statement is false, or type F if you think that statement is false. Our bad there on the graphic. Don't know what went wrong there. But if you guys want to continue on here and with our Steelers rookie breakdown series, we actually have our scouting report on Makai Lemon that we put out yesterday. If you guys want to check that out, I'll put the chip to that one in the top right if you guys want to check out that video, because today's video on Germie Bernard is now concluded. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already for more Steelers rookie breakdowns. We've already got Drew Aller and Makai Lemon's scouting reports and player profiles on the channel for you guys to check out. But coming up here, we're going to be talking about, Kaden Wetjen and Dalen Everett and Jennings Dunker and all these players that we took in the middle rounds of the NFL draft as well. So if you don't want to miss any of those rookie breakdowns, make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.